this evening at 6:20 p.m. on October 19th, 2023. Martha, would you please call the roll?
James Bunn.
Present.
Charlotte Burry.
Present.
Nicole Kopnick.
Present.
Penny Cutt.
Here.
Rich Daly.
Slightly late, but here.
Linda Thomas.
Here.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes of September 21st, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
And I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Minutes passed. I guess tonight, as Mr. Yaffe does, to explain the procedure of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I think everybody in this audience tonight kind of knows what it is. But I will like to say that the two ladies on to my right and the lady and the two gentlemen on the left, we are all volunteers. We are citizens of Pompano Beach, and we volunteer to do this, and we do not get paid. To my farthest right is Scott, who is from the Development Services Department that gives us lots of information. To the left is James, who is our city attorney, who gives us legal advice and makes sure we do everything right. And the one that actually runs the show and gives us all the paperwork is Martha behind the glass. The explanation of the procedures: anyone that is going to testify or think they're going to testify will be sworn in a moment. The procedure is, when your item is called, you come to that microphone, you give your name, first name, last name, and spell your last name, and your address. And then Scott will read what he has to read, and then you can present your case. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. Everything that is said is recorded, and you have the right to cross-examine, and you have the right for witnesses. Okay, so item number one.
Do we want everybody to stand up and I can swear them in?
Oh, that's correct. I have to swear them in. Thank you. I forgot. Anyone that's going to test or thinks they're going to testify, please stand and raise your right hand.
Okay, good evening. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, item number one, P&Z number 2317000007, K Properties Incorporated.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Jana Lota. That's L-H-O-T-A. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Holland & Knight with offices at 515 East Las Olas, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. For the record, Scott Reale with Development Services. This item is a little bit different because you won't be voting on anything except a request for a rehearing. At the September 21st meeting last month, the board voted to deny a special exception application, which was P&Z number 23-17000007. The applicant was seeking approval, as required by Section 155-4219H1, which are the districts where they're permitted, of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code, in order to utilize the property located at 3685 North Federal Highway, which is Zone B3, for a car wash. 2 board members voted in opposition to the requested relief. 4 members voted in support of the requested relief. As you know, for these types of items, you need a supermajority vote, so the item was denied. On September 26, 2023, the applicant formally requested a rehearing and submitted new evidence that they believe meets the threshold criteria for granting a rehearing. And should the board grant the rehearing request, the special exception application will be renoticed, which includes mailed notices and a posting in the Sun Sentinel, and the item will be placed on the November 16th, 2023 ZBA meeting agenda. Now, following is an excerpt from the ZBA Rules of Procedure regarding rehearing requests. Any petitioner who may be aggrieved by a decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals may, within 10 days from the date of the decision was orally pronounced, but not thereafter, apply to the ZBA for a rehearing at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board, unless heard earlier by special meeting. The petitioner requesting a rehearing shall establish all of the following, and there are 3 criteria. The first is that there is new evidence which could not have been discovered before the hearing by exercise of due diligence. The second criteria, that the evidence is material and not merely cumulative. And the last is that there is a strong likelihood that the new evidence will affect the results if a new hearing is granted. Now, the board will render its decision after hearing arguments based on the foregoing criteria, which the applicant will go through shortly, and they're in your backup under the rehearing request. There are several things. There's, which they'll talk about, FDOT meeting summary, FDOT pre-app letter, peak hour exhibit, queuing analysis, traffic impact statement, updated site plan, and some audio and video files as well. Now, the motion for rehearing, according to the rules of procedure, requires a supermajority vote, but I have been informed by our city attorney that that is not correct because the zoning code supersedes that, and it requires just a simple majority. And so, on a side note, the rules of procedure are in desperate need to be updated, but I would like our esteemed assistant city attorney to speak on this matter about the number of votes required for this item to be reheard.
James?
Madam Chair, as Scott has mentioned, our code, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact citation tonight, but our code provides for a concurring vote of 5 members only in the context of the applications that are generally provided to you, dealing with the variance, site plan approval, and special exception,
Temporary use permits.
temporary use permit,
Appeals.
variance. And what it says is that all other matters require only a simple majority. Because the code says that, it lines in conflict with our rules of procedure, which, as Scott said, we have been talking about for a year to update. And so those rules reflect that it does apply to motion for rehearing, but that's in direct conflict with what our code calls for. And as a result, the code supersedes the rules. So tonight, a simple majority of the board membership, because there are 6, there will be a requirement to obtain 4 votes in order, and all you're voting on tonight, as Scott has already mentioned, is whether or not you will have a actual hearing on the rehearing. Tonight is based upon the criteria whether or not they satisfy those 3 and whether or not you believe it should be set for a actual rehearing where you're possibly going to modify the prior decision that you made or affirm.
Thank you. Jana Loda once again for the applicant. Since I know that the hour's already getting late, I will try to streamline my comments as much as possible, but there is certainly some important information that we want to share with you that formed the basis of our motion for rehearing that's before you tonight. So just to, because I know there's a few members on the board that were not here back in September, just to kind of reorient you to the project site. Again, we are talking about 3685 North Federal Highway. The property is located north of Sample Road with Federal Highway to the east and Northeast 18th Terrace to the west. To the south of us is a existing gas station. At the September 21st hearing, the board considered actually 2 separate applications, not just the special exception application that we're before you tonight for a rehearing. The first application related to a variance request from section 155 .4303 of the Land Development Code to allow a drive-through service facility to be located 100 feet from a residentially zoned district. In that application, which was part and parcel of the larger presentation made by Ms. West, the board granted unanimously in favor. The second application, again, the one that's before you tonight, was a request for special exception approval to allow a automatic car wash use on property zone B3. And again, as Mr. Rial just indicated, that motion failed with 2 dissenting votes. I listened back to the video of the board's deliberation on the special exception, and I came up really with 3 kind of larger watershed issues that were discussed. One was the concern with vehicles exiting the site, given the queue that we had from where the vehicles left the tunnel to exit onto Federal Highway, given the proximity to Sample Road to the south and the gas station driveway. The other items that were discussed included the fact that the site plan as designed did not have any egress onto Northeast 18th Terrace provided other than for emergency vehicles, waste management, or as an escape lane for the drive-through if somebody arrived and decided and changed their mind. There was a lot of questions over that in terms of providing a secondary egress from the site. And all of this was in the context of by a few members over the perceived increase in traffic associated with this use over the existing use. So again, I won't repeat them, but there is the criteria for the granting of a rehearing. One is that there is new evidence that could not have been discovered before the hearing with the exercise of due diligence, that the evidence is material and not merely cumulative, and that there is a strong likelihood that the new evidence will affect the results if a new hearing is granted. We have, and I'll get to kind of the crux of why we're here tonight, is that after the September 21st hearing, we immediately started to pursue a determination from the FDOT that we had been waiting for some time. We ultimately got word of what that would be, which was what precipitated our motion for rehearing, and then ultimately did receive the letter. We believe that this evidence, which I'll show you in just a moment, is material because it directly affects the design of the site plan, which, as a domino effect, actually addressed a lot of the concerns raised by this board at the hearing on the 21st. So with that, I'm just going to kind of go back to the site plan that was before you back in September. And that site plan provided for 2 entrances on Federal Highway. The main ingress into the site on the north entrance, and then of course the egress towards the south, just to the north of the tunnel. This also had a gated entrance, as I just indicated, off of Northeast 18th. This is the site plan that we actually went to the FDOT in August, and which they verbally at that point had indicated that they had no issues with the dual ingress and egress on Federal Highway other than the width of the driveways. Here, just this quickly, this is just a rendering that again shows you the ingress to the north with the egress to the south. Very sensitive space bar. So here we have, this is the FDOT letter. And again, we, just so you know the timeline here, we had a pre-application meeting with the FDOT, I believe it was on August 17th of 2023. In anticipation of that meeting, we actually provided the FDOT with our traffic counts as well as our queuing studies from 2 other car wash locations in South Florida. Our meeting occurred. You probably see from the meeting minutes and the notes that the FDOT did not have an issue with the dual drive-through, the dual access on Federal Highway. Our intent, at least initially, based upon the design of some other sites that we have, was to maintain that, just to kind of separate that traffic. We proceeded, obviously, forward with this meeting in September. After the result we got, we went back to the FDOT to try to formalize that dual entrance and exit onto Federal Highway, only to get a letter only to hear from them verbally, and then ultimately with the letter we got on October 4th that you see an image there on the screen, and which was also included in your backup, that indicated that they wanted a singular driveway and for us to eliminate the southern driveway, which then resulted in a revised design. And that revised design, we believe, I'll switch to it now, is something that we believe actually would affect this board's ultimate decision, because it does provide some design enhancements that address the very concerns that this board discussed in deliberating on the motion. One of the first things, again, is the queuing of the traffic on site. There was a lot of discussion by the board in September about the length and the amount of queuing for cars exiting onto Federal Highway as they may wait to try to get into traffic. It may cause some sort of a backup. There was discussion about what happens do cars automatically stop? The president of the company indicated there's a pressure lever that cars, if they can't move forward, they would automatically stop the tunnel car wash. I don't know if you remember that. But as you can see here, with the elimination of that southern drive, we have now practically doubled the amount of queuing. And this is assuming everyone leaving the car wash is going to exit the site and not go in to use any of the vacuums, which actually the converse is true. This shows you also, the other thing that was discussed at the meeting was creating a secondary egress for the site. And with the time that we've had, we weren't able to really flesh it out because it was something that was kind of discussed on the fly during the hearing. You also see here where we have created in the site plan the dedicated north lane for exiting the site onto Northeast 18th. So now what you see in green is basically all of the queuing for cars leaving the site. We anticipate that for cars leaving the car wash tunnel, we would have directional signage that would direct them the two different means to exit the site, north and to the left onto 18th and north and to the right onto Federal Highway. You see here we still have more than enough queuing on site as represented by the vehicles with the red cars to have no queuing back onto any right-of-way. And the other thing I cannot emphasize enough is that you're seeing a lot of potential cars on this site, but that by no means is how this site's going to operate. This is basically showing you the queuing that's available and not the total number of cars that we anticipate at any one given time. And so with that, that brings me to my final slide. And that is the traffic, because this is the other thing that I heard during the meeting in September was by a number of members that the reason in part this is a special exception is because it's a much more intense use for the site. The existing site is improved with an over 12,000 square foot medical office building. It's also improved with a 2,500 square foot restaurant. This shows you basically using the IT accepted traffic manual for what is the trips per day for a particular use, shows you the proposed average daily, PM, and AM peak hour trips as compared to the car wash use. And as you can see from looking at this exhibit, all across the board, whether it's average daily, AM, or PM, this is actually a reduction in trips associated with the site. Now, I understand the existing site, I believe the office building may actually be sitting vacant right now, so certainly the trips associated with it are less because it's a very underutilized site. But I just wanted to show this as an example so that you could get a flavor for the actual trips associated with our use. So forgetting even what's on the site, looking just at the proposed uses for the car wash, you see that in the AM peak hour, and I just wanted to kind of put this in context, the AM peak hour, let me get my numbers right here, the total AM peak hour in the morning is 16 cars over an hour. That means 16 cars will enter and then 16 cars will exit. And again, the typical AM peak hours is 7 to 9 p.m. The PM peak hours, we're now talking about 25 cars over an hour. And that is, again, from 4 to 6 p.m. Now, if we factor in having a secondary egress onto 18th, the traffic engineer can distribute those trips based upon what they anticipate percentage-wise cars will leave Federal versus Northeast 18th. So in the AM, again, we're looking at about 11 leaving onto Federal over the course of an hour. with 5 exiting to the rear, and then 18 in the PM, and if I do my math, 6 to the rear. So circling back again, just wanted to put that into the context of what are we really looking at in terms of cars entering and leaving the site, into the context with real numbers for you. So with that, I'll conclude, and that is just going back to the criteria for the granting of a rehearing. We do believe that the letter that we received, the determination that came down both verbally and then with the letter on October 4th from the FDOT with respect to the permitting of that access drive, and I remind you, Federal Highway is an FDOT road. It is under the jurisdiction and control of the FDOT, to eliminate that south driveway and the resulting changes in the site plan, which on almost every level, I believe, address the concerns by this board on the 27th, coupled with the other items I mentioned tonight, warrant a rehearing. And we just respectfully request the opportunity to come back before you with the full plans and proposal to you. And with that, I stand ready to answer any questions, as well as Ms. West, who's our planning consultant, and we also have our Vice President of Development, Daryl Peterson, with us as well. And thank you.
Thank you. Any board have any questions?
I make a motion that we approve the request for rehearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the board? Martha, please call the roll.
Okay, James Bunn,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Nicole Kopnick,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Richard Dalley,
Yes.
Linda Thomas.
Yes.
The rehearing on this matter will take place on November the 16th.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
And this meeting is adjourned.